I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up with the head. Intercepted. 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And then the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Another rough afternoon for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as they drop to 4-6 after a last-second field goal from Jake Moody puts the 49ers up 23-20, and that is your ball game. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast live on YouTube today. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me today from Bleav in 49ers, a first-time guest of the show. Excited to get your input, Evan. Evan Giddings from Bleav in 49ers joins the show. And we normally bring in, opposing team hosts before the game. But today, for the first time ever, we get some opposing opinions after the game has unfolded. This was a battle today, Evan. I really thought that despite the miscues for both of these teams, which we will surely get into, it was an entertaining game, to say the least. Really came down to it.
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you for having me on, Rhett. It's a game that I think it breeds a lot of frustration for both sides, and really the only difference, I think, in the amount of frustration between the 49ers and the Buccaneers is the final score. The Niners ended up getting the victory, the Buccaneers did not, but neither team, in my opinion, played particularly well in this game. If you're giving out grades, it's nowhere near an A outside of perhaps a couple of players, but it was a game that by the end of it, you completely forgot what happened in the first half because it felt like the last 5 minutes of that football game were a lifetime. And it was just penalties. It was some inept play. It was a couple of great plays, pulling just rabbits out of hats. But at the end of the day, the Niners are 5-4. The Buccaneers are 4-6. And unfortunately for the losing side, that's a tough L to take.
Yeah, it was a 7-point game at halftime in 2023. It was a 7-point game at halftime today in 2024, and kind of a tale of two halves today. The Bucs were much more competitive in that second half, but it was stifling in that first half. The Niners really did a good job of controlling the football, controlling the pace of the game. They kept their offense on the field, and I think the storyline for the defense, at least for the Buccaneers, continues to be Todd Bowles and their ability to not get a stop. I mean, the fact of the matter is Brock Purdy came into this game with an impressive resume against the Buccaneers. And, I thought the Bucs did a decent job at shutting down Christian McCaffrey and trying their best to limit the run game because Christian McCaffrey is such a talented player that, he's going to get his, to a certain degree. He's one of those players that, he's going to get those plays every now and again. I thought they did an okay job at putting a lid on him today, but he certainly made a couple of plays here and there. But in that first half, it was all San Francisco. They were just effectively moving the football and grinding things out. They dominated the time of possession in the first half today.
Yeah, it was effective in every category except for the scoreboard. You're right. They absolutely owned that first half against the Buccaneers, but you look up and it's a one-score ball game, and Tampa Bay gets the ball coming out of the half. So as much as the Niners offense and defense, I think, was on similar pages, they have been a team that has really struggled in the red zone. That was the same case today. 1 for 3 in the gold zone, as they call it here in San Francisco, and outside of a Ricky Pearsall massive play, 46-yard touchdown, his very first in the NFL, which in and of itself was a pretty special moment for a guy that, almost died about 6 weeks ago. That was extremely impressive, but the rest of the offense was just kind of clogged up really when they got to the 20-yard line. So, what I'll say about McCaffrey is that it was great to see him back out there on the field. 13 attempts, about 15 is what I was hoping for. The fact that he didn't get a massive workload on the ground doesn't necessarily surprise me. It's more about the Niners' lack of commitment as a whole to the run game. They threw it 36 times in this game. They ran it only 22, and they were leading for the majority of that football game. But where McCaffrey really just absolutely excels is also as a one-on-one mismatch on the outside or out of the backfield. And I thought he flashed fantastically today against a Buccaneers defense that's relatively banged up. And McCaffrey getting 6 catches for 68 yards to me, that's where he is such a dual threat for this Niners team and adds a different dynamic that they haven't had so far.
Yeah, I think for this Buccaneers defense, effective pass rush was one of the biggest storylines today. Brock Purdy had 2 to 3 business days on some of these plays to just sit back there and find a target. And we talked about it headed into this game. This Niners offense is full of players that we refer to as buck killers, just athletic at their position and able to extend plays after the point of contact. George Kittle did that plenty of times today, attacking the middle of the field. He was a big-time target in the receiving game. 3 receptions, 57 yards for the tight end. You mentioned Ricky Pearsall, 4 catches, 73 yards, and a touchdown. Juwan Jennings was the man today, 7 receptions, 93 yards, wasn't able to find the end zone. And then Christian McCaffrey doing most of his damage in the pass game today for the Niners, 6 catches for 68 yards. 13 carries for 39 yards. He only averages 3 yards a carry. But again, I think looking back at this Buccaneers defense, crunch time defense is where they just fall apart. And, the Niners, it's a 2020 ball game, and they get the ball back in their offense hands with less than a minute to go. And, mistakes for both of the offenses were abundant in the last 5 or 6 minutes of this game. There were flags all over the place. That was one of the biggest reasons the Bucs were able to march down the field and score when they did in that fourth quarter. But your defense just doesn't hold up. The pass rush doesn't get any meaningful pressure when it counts. The middle of the field is just as soft and exposed as it always has been. The soft coverage comes up time and time again. Josh Hayes, God bless the guy, making more negative plays for the Buccaneers secondary out there today. He was getting bullied. It didn't matter who the target was. He was on the receiving end of it. It's the same old thing for this Buccaneers defense. But, Evan, we were talking a little bit before the show, and, we even said to start the show here, kind of a sloppy showing for both teams down the stretch here. Your thoughts on that game-winning drive for San Francisco? Because a couple of mistakes here and there, but, ultimately they get the job done on the leg of Jake Moody, who had a rough afternoon as well.
Yeah, I thought that was massive for Jake Moody, and a guy that was going to be the GOAT of this game. He went from 0 to hero in about 44 yards and 3 seconds left on the game clock. So that was massive. But for them to go up the field as quickly as they did, I think that Brock Purdy, his final line is probably going to indicate to you that he was stellar in this football game. And I don't think that was necessarily the case in the first half or even through the first 3 quarters. But in the fourth quarter, had almost 200 passing yards, and that final drive just goes right down the field. First play, 1st and 10, right to Jennings for 6 yards. Then next play to Ricky Pearsall, gets out of bounds. Both of those plays for 6 yards. Brock Purdy to Ricky Pearsall again, who gets off a tight coverage play for 14 yards, using that timeout. And then he goes to Juwan Jennings, who widely, kind of a savvy veteran move, stays inbounds, doesn't go out of bounds to pick up an extra 6 or 7 yards to put his kicker in a more favorable position. That I just thought that last drive was masterfully put together by Brock Purdy. And to your point, the 2 possession receivers that really killed the Buccaneers today were the 2 guys that did it on that final drive. Ricky Pearsall, their first-round pick out of Florida, which, of course, you're well aware of and familiar with. And then, of course, Juwan Jennings, who has really emerged since Brandon Ayuk's injury a few weeks ago to his ACL as the de facto number 1. Juwan Jennings was not in the football game the last 2 weeks, I believe, as he was dealing with somewhat of a hip injury. But his return today was massive for the Niners, and they needed all their guys, including McCaffrey and including Jennings.
Yeah, it was a tough day, especially matching up with Juwan Jennings and some of these other receiving targets for the Niners. Jordan Whitehead led the Bucs in tackles today with 7 solo tackles, 5 assists. 8 tackles for Antoine Winfield Jr. Kalijah Cansey up there as well with a sack on the afternoon. Only 1 of 3 sacks for the Buccaneers today. Greg Gaines had a nice coverage sack in the first half, and then Joe Tryon-Shoyinka made a big play. He was in the backfield a couple of times as well. But, going back to what I had said, it's more the same problems that continue to plague this Buccaneers defense. You get a couple of sacks today. That's good to see. You like to see your interior guys getting the pressure. They're the only ones who seemingly are getting the meaningful pressure this season for Tampa Bay along that defensive line. But when it matters, when you need a stop, when you need to get off the field on 3rd down, especially, I think is where the Buccaneers struggle and continue to struggle. Now, it does say that the Niners were only 5 for 11 when it comes to third down efficiency today, but the third downs that they were able to convert were just backbreaking. They were keeping drives alive. They were keeping that Buccaneers defense on the field. And it was much more obvious in that first half, but they were dictating the pace of the game, and they were wearing these guys out. But the middle of the field continues to be a problem. And, personnel is an issue. We've talked about it before. I think the Todd Bowles conversation carries over from last week. I'm not going to be as hard on Todd Bowles this week as I was in previous weeks because the conversation remains the same. But when you do look at the players on the field, man, they have to make plays. Tackling was awful today. Unfortunately, again, I hate to say it because we don't tolerate any Levante David slander on this show, but he just doesn't have the wheels that he used to. He doesn't have the sideline to sideline speed that he used to. And, looking at him being ironclad in the middle of this Buccaneers defense is just something you can't do anymore, especially with how bad KJ Britt has been in coverage next to him. So, it's more of the same here, but let's focus on the other side of the football here. Evan, wanted to get your thoughts on the Niners defense. Coming into this game, Bosa was a defensive lineman that, you got to circle twice. You can't not guard that guy. And with the Buccaneers losing left tackle Tristan Wirfs today to injury, hopefully we get an update on him soon. But they were forced to make some adjustments. Justin Skule, number 77, came in at left tackle. And albeit, Bosa ultimately got his. He gets a sack on Skule, one-on-one. You can't necessarily leave that guy on an island with one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. But I thought the Bucs did an okay job today at preventing the defensive line from just teeing away at Baker Mayfield. I thought the Bucs O-line definitely showed up today for most of the game, despite, Wirfs going out as well.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I think the defense, much like every single game so far this season for the 49ers, it's got a lot of big names, but they have not played big games. And that also includes today. There was a lot of mistakes made by, I thought, the Niners defense. None probably more costly than maybe your leader, Fred Warner, committing a face mask penalty during that Bucs final drive that led to the game-tying field goal. Nick Bosa, yes, he got a big sack in that football game. It was against a backup left tackle. He did nothing with Wirfs for the majority of that first half. And I think that Nick Bosa also got caught in between a couple of option plays on the Bucky Irving touchdown run. I think that was basically where he just crashed down and let him run right up the middle, right past him. And that has not happened all too often throughout his career, but it's been happening more frequently this season. And I think the Niners defense is just one that I have seen now 9 times look extremely good in the first half, look strong, look stout, look quick, look athletic, and then they get worn down over the course of this football game. And the one thing that I actually was a bit shocked at is the fact that the Buccaneers did not run the football more than they did, because I mean, they were able to get 4 on the ground, 120, on about 20 carries, is a solid number. But you can beat this Niners team by playing the long game. And a few teams have been able to do that don't have the caliber of talent that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do. And so the defense to me for the 49ers, I was not super impressed with. Again, they made enough plays to win this football game, but I guarantee you, and I know for a fact that everybody in that locker room, because it was the same feeling after the Cowboys game on Sunday night that I was in the locker room for 2 weeks ago, where they all looked around and said, we won this football game, but we made it a game it didn't have to be. And that's probably how they feel against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, again, they beat, but they probably should have won by more than 3 points.
I thought there were a couple of moments today, especially late in the game, where, the Bucs should have kept the pedal down as far as the run game goes. I don't know if it was either, Rachaad White getting carries when I felt like it should have been Bucky Irving, or them just getting a little too cute on offense late in the game. There were inefficiencies all day, but it seemed like they were trying to make a clear effort to get this run game going at certain points. Bucky Irving, your leading rusher for the Bucs today, 13 carries, 73 yards, and a touchdown, averaging 5.6 yards a tote. I mean, it's a trend for this young man at this point. It's a rookie season. He looks like one of the best rookie running backs in the NFL, consistently averaging over 4.5 yards per carry. You love to see that. Rachaad White, 10 carries for 31 yards, averaging 3.1 yards a tote. Late in the game, he was the crunch time back for the Buccaneers, and I was a little disappointed. I thought there were times today where, albeit chances downfield were very scarce. You know, the Buccaneers have obviously been missing reinforcements in that wide receiver room. You're relying on guys like Raheem Jarrett and Trey Palmer and Sterling Shepard to step up and make plays. Jalen McMillan, I think he was active today, but I don't know how much he was actively out there. Got to take a look at the snap count this week, but there just wasn't much of anything downfield today. And a couple of times late in that game, I thought they got away from the running backs when they shouldn't have. We do have a caller here on the Autograph fan line from the 626. We'll get to our first caller of the show. You're on CFP. Who's this?
What's up, guys? It's Richard T. from the West Coast.
Richard, how you doing, my friend? Tuning in all the way from the West Coast. I know it's a raucous afternoon for most of the people around you, but being a Bucs fan in LA, I'm sure is going to lead to a disappointing afternoon for you.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same for the last 4 weeks, man.
A month straight, dude.
Yeah, it's kind of brutal. This is not how we all saw the season going, right? Being back to back defending division champs. But man, I really can't be mad at this game. Look, I'm keeping it real here. I'm just glad that we were able to at least have a lead. It was close. And it would normally not be this close in previous matchups. Bowles versus Shanahan, right? I mean, this game is really the reason why this game was so close is really more because of San Francisco's miscues, right? You had muff punt, you had late penalties in the game, you had
3 missed field goals.
The 3 missed field goals, biggest thing. Yeah, I know I was missing something there. This easily could have been a 35, almost 40-point game. For San Fran. And it's just unfortunate for our Bucs in the position that we're at, losing Chris Godwin, losing Mike Evans. Our offense is a little predictable. Now, kudos to Liam Cohen because he's drawing up some creative plays. Because look, the offense is going to be, it's either if we're running, and if we're not running, we're throwing it to a running back or K. Dotton, right? Defenses are going to challenge the wide receivers. They're going to dare us to throw it deep and stack those boxes. And for the success that we've seen so far in the last 4 weeks, knowing that that's what our offense is entailing, that's not bad for Liam Cohen. I'm not going to be mad at him for that. I know you said you're not going to give Todd Bowles too much crap this week because it's the same thing, but guess what? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
The game was on the line. And the defense for the last 45 seconds cannot hold their own. And that's just frustrating. It's frustrating to watch, but it was an entertaining game. There were some fun things to watch for both teams, right? Kudos to Kittle. That catch for touchdown was spectacular. Was not an easy catch. Frustrating for Bucs fans to watch as Purdy was open was unpressured. I think he made himself a PB&J sandwich before he threw that. Yeah. Before he threw that touchdown. It's crazy. And then that one, the 4th down conversion for Baker with Joey Bosa hanging on his left arm. That was amazing. That was jump off your seat kind of excitement of a play. So, unfortunately, they couldn't finish that drive off with a touchdown. But, it was a very entertaining game, to say the least. If you're not a fan of either team, very entertaining game.
Absolutely. It was a knockdown, drag-out afternoon of football, and a hot one at that. I think it was damn near 90 degrees, probably close to 100 on the field. And it's always humid down here as well. But, Richard, we appreciate your call, my friend. We will talk to you soon. And, as always, go Bucs.
Go Bucs. Let's go.
All right. We had another person on hold, but I think they dipped out of here. That's all right. We will dive a little bit more into the afternoon for Tampa Bay. So wanted to talk some more about this Buccaneers offense. Yeah, I think it was probably the toughest showing that Liam Cohen has had as Buccaneers offensive coordinator. I mean, they didn't really answer much against the Denver Broncos. That was a game that they simply didn't show up ready to play at all. But today, only 212 total yards for a top 5 scoring offense in the NFL, 105 passing yards on the day. So Baker Mayfield, 18 for 29, 116 yards, 1 touchdown. I thought Baker Mayfield did as good as he could have today. There were a couple of brutal drops, and again, a tough time trying to develop some routes downfield, trying to make that big play. The Bucs took a couple of shots, but I mean, you can probably count on one hand how many times they took a shot downfield today. Sorry, I'm trying to look up how many sacks the Buccaneers gave up.
2, I think.
Okay, yeah, I think you are correct here. Sorry about that.
No, the Buccaneers actually had more sacks than the Niners did today.
Yeah, only 2 sacks. Or, I'm sorry, 2 sacks? Yeah, 2 sacks today from the 49ers defensive line. Nick Bosa was obviously able to get 1. But I thought for the most part, Baker did a really good job taking care of the football, taking what the receivers were giving him. They were looking at the running backs, every now and again, but he didn't try to play hero ball today. He was able to stay composed in the pocket. He was able to minimize those mistakes. And I know it's a loss for the Buccaneers today, and this is an offense that could have got the go-ahead touchdown at the end of that game there, but when you look at the quarterback position, I thought he did a decent job today, and that's all the Bucs fans want him to do, because you remember it was that brutal stretch where he had 7 interceptions in 3 games. In these last couple of weeks, you've just been wanting him to take care of the football. He was able to do that today and make some things happen against this Niners defense, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to compare quarterbacks, obviously, Baker Mayfield didn't outplay Brock Purdy, but I think his line is a little deceptive, and I think it's skewed both ways, right? Like, if I'm looking at the total box score, the eye test would tell me that Baker threw for more than $116. It would also tell me that Brock Purdy did not throw for 353. So, a lot of it kind of came down to the end there. I think Baker played bad at all. It didn't really feel like anybody was open. And that's why the majority of his passes are going to either Otton, who also had a big drop for him earlier in that football game on a 3rd down, or to his running backs. And then on the opposite side, Brock Purdy you pick your choice. I mean, Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, like the weapons in this game are just simply not fair. And so that's why I think it is unfair to compare the 2 quarterbacks and the positions that they were put in, because Baker Mayfield had to do significantly more in this football game. Brock Purdy should have outplayed Baker Mayfield. He did. The Niners offense nearly doubled the Tampa Bay offense as far as yards are concerned. However, they won on a walk-off field goal. So how does that happen? It happens because the Niners special teams was inept today. Again, not just the 3 missed field goals, but I thought the punt drop basically got and kind of triggered the Buccaneers in this football game. Their defense was leaky in the second half. They were fighting each other on the sideline. Kyle Shanahan was cursing up a storm. Like, the Niners did not play a good football game today. And it might sound, a little bit harsh for a lot of people that are hearing me for the first time. Hi, my name is Evan Giddings. I'm from San Francisco. The San Francisco 49ers almost gave this game to Tampa Bay. And I realize that it's 4 losses in a row for you guys. A lot of them have been close, but the Buccaneers should not have been in this football game, and the Niners let them back into it. And the fact that they almost won, to me, that would have been significant.
Well, and that's, probably the most disappointing part that a lot of fans are going to pin on Todd Bowles as well, is the fact that the game was right there against these good teams. Because listen, both of these teams I think are going to win some games down the stretch. The Bucs going into the bye week, they have some favorable matchups on the other side of it. I think they're going to win some games. They're going to be relying on some other teams around the NFC to lose some games, but I think the Niners are the same way. I think they're going to win some games here down the stretch, but the Bucs needed to take advantage of the inefficiencies of San Francisco today, and that is what has kept them in a lot of these games these last couple of weeks. And they just aren't doing enough down the stretch to take advantage. And it is incredibly frustrating to see because, these are games that, people didn't expect the Bucs to be competitive in them. They didn't expect the Bucs to take Kansas City to overtime. And I don't think they saw this one playing out with a last-second field goal for San Francisco. I think a lot of people did pick the Niners to win, but the way that they won is important. but it's the own inefficiencies of the Bucs, and it's the same old mistakes, and it's not being able to overcome this scenario that you find yourself in time and time and time and time again. And we'll talk a little bit more about the offense here as we continue to wrap up this post-game show for Week 10. The running backs for Tampa Bay today, I think, goes along the lines of Liam Cohen's afternoon, but 23 carries for the running backs, 1 carry for Sterling Shepard out of the wide receiver position on a jet sweep. He gets 3 yards, but Bucky Irving, your leading rusher, 13 for 73. Rachaad White, 10 for 31. Bucky Irving finds the end zone. I just want to rant for a minute, but I was a little upset with Bucky Irving not being featured more at the end of the game. And I think this is one of those things where you look at the game being right there for Tampa Bay. The Buccaneers have possession of the ball, and it's a 17-20 ball game. You are in the red zone trying to score to make it 24-20. And they just get cute on offense. They get away from running the football. They try to, I don't know what fake they were trying to run that involved Baker Mayfield doing a 360 no-scope after taking the snap, but he almost dropped the football, and then you lose yardage. Things like that, getting away from what worked at a lot of points in this game, costed this offense, and it didn't allow them to find a rhythm. Getting away from Bucky Irving at the end of this game is really what bothers me the most, because Rachaad White, although he did have 10 carries for 31 yards today, he was not the more effective ball carrier. It was clear as day that he was not the more effective ball carrier. And I don't know why late in the fourth quarter, when you are in scoring position, you put the ball in the hands of a guy that has not been the better ball carrier. I don't get paid to make these decisions, Evan, but it is frustrating to see a capable running back in this Bucs backfield for the first time in a very long time. I mean, the Buccaneers have a plethora of riches. Part of my rant has to do with, Sean Tucker getting 0 snaps today, which is very frustrating as well. Just a couple of weeks removed from getting NFC Offensive Player of the Week, and he hasn't seen the field at all. And you put the ball in the hands of Rachaad White down the stretch here. I like Rachaad White as a player. I like him as a receiver. I like him as a pass catcher. I wish they would maybe turn him into a Deebo Samuel type of player, because he's big, he's physical. I think he has that skill set, but I just don't like the management here down the stretch. And I thought, changing some guys around for this Buccaneers backfield, they got away from it late in the game, and the Niners were able to take advantage. I mean, the play that I'm talking about. I think it was that last drive. The Bucs were trying to get into scoring position, and they ran whatever fake they ran. It was a play action to set up whatever. There's nothing downfield. Baker almost loses the ball, and it's a non-factor in the game. They lose a costly play there, and it just makes it harder than it has to be, I think.
No, for sure. I mean, I think that play specifically was actually one that they ran to affection early in the game. I think it was like a 12 or 13-yard scamper by Irving. It was just a kind of a trap play where Baker fakes a handoff to a running back and spins, and you kind of the running back will counter to the right side instead of just a typical strong side run. So they'd ran that play before, but clearly Baker wasn't able to execute. I mean, they also had a fumbled snap before that. So there was a lack of execution on both sides, and the fact that the Buccaneers were in range. I mean, Baker made maybe the best play I've ever seen from a quarterback, being able to literally stiff arm a 290-pound defensive lineman and throw a ball somehow with like half a ligament. That was incredible. But the reason that they got into field goal range was because the Niners committed 3 completely boneheaded penalties, and one of which I think they committed 2-on-1 play on Baker Mayfield. So, it's like the Niners committed more penalties in this game. They had more yards on penalties. They committed more gaffes. Like this was a very poorly played football game. And one aspect of this that we talked about on Bleav in 49ers is the fact that the Buccaneers played on Monday night. The San Francisco 49ers played last Sunday. They were coming off a bye week. Kyle Shanahan's 9-1 in November in his last 3 seasons. Like, when they come off a bye, they are buttoned up, they are disciplined, and they kick ass. And they did not do that today. I realize they won the football game, but the Niners, despite all the glowing things that people will write about them, did not deserve to win this football game. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers probably didn't deserve to win it either. And that's really the only reason that the Niners are 5-4 and the Bucs are 4-6. So, that final drive was one that was maddening. I'm sure watching it for whatever jersey you were wearing, whatever hat you had on, whatever side you were on, that was a maddening football game, especially the second half to watch. And I agree with you. They should have ran the ball more. That's where the Niners are weak. They have, I think, a middle of the pack defense against the rush. They give up about 4.7 per play. Whether it's Irving, White, Tucker, who we didn't see today. Yeah, the Buccaneers, their plan of attack in this game should have been to run the ball 35 times. And I don't think they even got to 25.
Let's get back to the phones here. We got a couple of people on hold. Appreciate you guys hanging on for us. From the 708, you're on the Cannon Fire Podcast. Who's this?
This is James from Chicago, the biggest Buck fan in the Midwest.
James, how you feeling today?
Well, you know what? I'm not feeling too good. I've been watching this Bucks team for several years now, particularly when Bowles came in. And, this team has really played their hearts out the last 2 weeks. I mean, close but no cigar. I mean, when Worst went out and this other kid gets in, he did the best that he could. And they had the game right at the grasp of victory. And just when you need it, key stops on the defensive side of the ball, the thing that I have watched for years now is the Bulls defense will leave that middle of the field open. He will give too much room on the sidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that you already know before it even happens. And it happens over and over again. And it's just a shame. Now, I agree with you. I think that the offensive coach got cute at the end. I don't understand why Irving, I mean, we're just guys that's looking at the game. These guys get paid to make these decisions. But Ray Charles could have seen that Irving should have been on the field. So, I was talking to a friend of mine from Detroit, and he says the Bucs is a dangerous team. And they are. And if they could ever just pull it together. But the defense, they've broken my heart. I keep going back to this with people. When Brady brought that team back against the Rams, and it was tied up, and the Rams had that ball with 40 seconds, and that Bulls defense again gave up the middle of the field to get their hearts broken again. So I'm just going to listen to you young guys and break that down for me.
James, I appreciate your call, my friend. We'll talk to you soon. Go Bucks.
Thank you.
Yeah, another heartbreaking loss for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. And I mean, that's the fact of the matter, is that it falls on the shoulders of the defense for another week in a row. And if you're Todd Bowles, you cannot continue to play soft coverage against an offense in crunch time. I mean, when you're playing a 2-minute offense like that, you have to buckle in. You have to get off of the field. I thought with the amount of times that opposing teams have just marched down the field on us, I thought he would have learned his lesson by now. But again, as we've said about Todd Bowles before, he is consistently inconsistent. So I don't know if he's ever going to learn his lesson at this point. We do have some more people on the phone lines here, Evan. We're going to get some more calls from the 727. You're on the Cannon Fire Podcast. Who's this?
Hey, this is...
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hey, your name cut out. Who is this?
Hey, it's Zach. How are you doing?
Zach, how you doing, my friend? Good to hear you.
I'm hanging in. Another fun one, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Well, it's time for some good news, bad news. Last week when I called, I brought up the fact that under Todd, it seems like this team lacks identity. The good news is I think we found our identity. The bad news is it's a team that plays really hard and lets you down. That doesn't feel too good. Trying to assign the blame and point the fingers a little bit harder this game. I think San Fran kept us in it, pretty obviously so. It didn't feel like a horrifically coached game. I think players gave up large chunk plays in inopportune moments. You had things like the Cansey penalty. the roughing the passer that was just not what you want to see. But this offense goes out there and fights every week, and it seems like the defense just lets them down in the worst times. And today, I do feel like there are instances where the offense went 3 and out, and then you got your gas defense back on the field, and then you get yards put on them. So it's not as if the offense is guilt-free, but I think the Bucs stops with the defense, unfortunately, and we've seen this story repeat time and time again, and it's gotten old. And just thinking now how pivotal that playoff game last year against Philadelphia might have been, like in a different world, do you see a different team if Tampa Bay gets blown out in that first playoff game? I think they move away from bowls. I don't know.
No,
hypothetical.
I think that playoff performance last year 100% kept Todd Bowles in Tampa. You know, an exciting run down the stretch. You go 5-1 to make the postseason. It's going to be a lot of difficult conversations about your head coach at that point. But I think winning that game decisively against the Eagles in that first round and then fighting the way that they did against the Eagles, like a lot of people wanted to give Bowles the benefit of the doubt. It took a lot for that team to play the way that they did down the stretch last year, but they are now in a situation where they are going to have to do the exact same thing this year if they even want to be relevant. So it's like you have to take the good with the bad, and you have to kind of ask yourself, have we seen the best that this team has to offer under Todd Bowles? Like, is the best thing that Todd Bowles can do for Tampa a 5-1 stretch after, a terrible middle section of the season? Like that's not going to win you a Super Bowl at the end of the day. And I like Todd Bowles, man. I don't want to jump on the fire Bowles train, but the same malpractice week in and week out, it gets so much tougher to defend. And yes, absolutely, I think if you get an ounce more production out of this offense in that first half, you're talking about a much different finish to this ball game. But the fact of the matter is, it came down to the defense for another week in a row, and they let us down for another week in a row, making the same mistakes they made last week, Zach.
Yeah, it's one thing if your offense is pedestrian, middle of the pack, but if your quarterback's going out there throwing himself through people and fucking stiff-arming Bosa to complete fourth down, and no, I'm sorry, I don't want to hear it. And I know it's a minority, a vocal minority of people shitting on Baker, but it's like, no, I'm not going to hear that from you. That the only thing keeping this team together is Baker's fight. Like there is something to be said about the leadership that goes into that position, carrying over to the offense and the rest of the team. And I really do think there's something legitimate to be said about a kind of jokey point of team identity being choking that kind of comes from Bowles. And I think you can armchair coach that last drive on goal to go and wonder whether or not White needs to be in the package or if they wanted to get more aggressive and throw more. But the point being, you have to run there because we've seen the story play out where you go for a pass, it's incomplete, you don't have receivers to throw to, and they're going to shade Otten. So now San Fran gets the ball back. The result's the same. You kicked a field goal, and now they have, 2 to 3 timeouts to work with? So your hands are tied because you don't trust the defense. Because you can't trust the defense because they're trashed.
Yeah.
And that falls on who?
Yeah, it's on Todd Bowles. I mean, it's, listen, player execution is a big part of it. You play with who you have. We've talked about the injuries for this defense, and they've kind of overcome that to a certain degree so far. I know that the inefficiencies with KJ Britt in the middle of the field, there's not much you can do. We saw some more of JJ Russell out there today. He made a couple of big-time tackles, but they're doing what they can with the players that they have, but I think it is just repeatedly putting these guys in a position to fail is what is going to continually be talked about. Josh Hayes having another rough afternoon today. That's on Todd Bowles. Like, he knows what he has in these guys when he comes into this matchup, and he sends them out there to do whatever they do, and that has been 4 straight losses now for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But Zach, I appreciate you chiming in, my friend. Always appreciate your insight. We're going to wrap this thing up and get out of here, but we'll talk to you soon. Go Bucs.
Awesome. Yes, sir. Go Bucs. Thanks, boys.
Evan, wanted to get some final thoughts from you about today's game. You kind of had, talked about the overarching tone being a disappointing afternoon for both of these teams. I know San Francisco comes out with the win but it was nitty and gritty. It was a dirty win. It was, it took a last-second field goal. You had to lean on the field goal kicker, who it kind of disappointed you most of the afternoon, but they do ultimately get the job done. Your thoughts on the matchup today and the Niners moving forward here in the NFC?
Well, it's funny. One of your callers mentioned the word fight. Fighting is good when you're fighting against opponents. Fighting is not good when you're fighting against your own team, especially like we talked about before the episode, Rhett, when you're winning. You're up by 3 points in the fourth quarter, and Deebo Samuel shoves his long snapper after Jake Moody misses his third field goal. That is not the sign of a team, in my opinion, that's ready to go out and make a run. And this was supposed to be the game where that started. You're getting your savior back. You're getting Christian McCaffrey back. He looked, by all accounts, fantastic for a guy that's been playing or trying to fight through Achilles tendonitis. And you do that? I don't know if it was Deebo's fault. I don't know if Jake Moody said something. I don't know if Tabor Pepper, the long snapper, did something he shouldn't have. It doesn't really matter. That, to me, is a symbol of a team that is beginning to fracture, and maybe already has been. And that's not where you want to be at 5-4, still with everything in front of you, fighting yourself on the sideline. They won this game, but that's why, again, it's just an encapsulation of the entire performance. The 49ers fought themselves today on the field, off the field, and that's why they had to come down to a final field goal to beat the Buccaneers. With all due respect, Tampa Bay should not have been in this football game. They're battered, they're bruised, they're injured, they're not whole. If the Buccaneers had either of their two-star wide receivers, they win this football game today. And they damn near did without either of them. The Niners did not deserve to win this game, but they did. And so if you want to give them credit for that, you absolutely can. But to me, the fact that they were fighting themselves shows that this team is beginning to teeter. And it's been teetering for quite some time. And they got to figure that out.
For the Buccaneers, looking to turn things around after the bye week, I mean, you can't get much lower than you are right now. Losing 4 straight games, you head into the bye week, coming off of a 4-2 record, now at 4-6, looking to make some noise here in the NFC wildcard down the stretch. Some very winnable games for this Buccaneers team, but they certainly have to find a consistent sense of identity, as one of our callers, Zach, had mentioned earlier. I think team cohesion is in a little bit of a better place than San Francisco. I don't think our long snapper is going to be punching anybody anytime soon, but they certainly need to make some changes. I think both of these teams are going to have to play their asses off here down the stretch if they want to remain competitive in the playoff hunt. But Evan Giddings from Bleav in 49ers, ladies and gentlemen. Evan, want to thank you for your time this afternoon, my friend. For anyone who is unfamiliar with your work, where can they find you and your great content?
So Bleav in 49ers, myself along with Tommy Call III. Check us out there. Download, rate, subscribe. I work for 95.7 The Game, the Warriors flagship in San Francisco. I also host our 49ers pregame show and do a little play-by-play for those of you who like West Coast Conference basketball. You can catch me calling St. Mary's men's basketball as well.
Fantastic. Thank you once again for your time this afternoon. Make sure you find our show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can find more news and updates on the Red and Pewter Pirates throughout the week. YouTube.com/Cannon Fire Podcast. Make sure you subscribe for updates every day about your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram, and Twitter at Redicus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. But that is our post-game show for Week 10. Taking a little bit of a break here with the bye week coming up for the Bucs, but we will talk to you on a midweek show before then, hopefully with some more answers and injury updates today. The Buccaneers lose Zion McCollum and Tristan Wirfs. We will hopefully get an update on those guys before the end of the week. Looking to get healthy on the other side of the bye week and maybe even a Mike Evans return on our hands. But thank you once again for hanging out with us today. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Giddings. We will talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, go Bucs.